Well, Jim, I'm so excited that escaping enemy mode is out on the streets.
Yeah, boy, it's been 17 days now. I'm counting.
I don't know that we've been doing a lot of media engagements, and so a lot of people are asking very interesting questions about escaping enemy mode. What are some of the questions?
Well,
you're
actually, I
getting?
had a chance to meet with about 50 people last night. They wanted to hear about it, and the big question seemed to be how do we actually talk with each other about it? Because it's like, oh yeah, it's really obvious now. I'm starting to see this everywhere, but it hasn't been part of our conversation. So if I bring it up and I tell you you're in enemy mode, is that going to make you mad? And that sort of thing. So we're talking a lot about how do we become self-aware and be able to say to somebody else, I'd really like some help with this. That we can actually talk about it. And people seem to smile a lot about that. They're like, oh, wow, really? If we could just talk about this with each other, we could avoid the pitfalls.
Yeah. Well, sometimes talking about it doesn't help, though, correct?
Right. But, if you can identify that this is part of our relationship, we look for it. We're aware of it. We can name it when we see it. You don't get out of it by talking, but you can trigger all those skills that you have developed along the way of like quieting yourself or noticing something you appreciate about the other person, or just deciding, is it really in my best interest to make you lose right now, which should be the intelligent enemy mode kind of thing. So what have you encountered with people when you're doing the interviews?
Well, I talked to, of course, I've talked to a number of radio and podcast people in the past 3 weeks, and there are a lot of questions from, is that even a thing, to how do we recognize it, to can we escape it, and is that what's going on in social media when everybody piles on one person and seeks to cancel them? There have been interesting questions about enemy mode and hate, and where does hate come from? And we talk about in the book how hate is deeper than an opinion. Hate forms long before a conscious thought happens. When you conclude that person's not for me, they're not on my side, and that can harden into a hateful thing over time between whole groups, towns, teams, whatever.
Yeah, it's really poorly researched, actually.
That's right, exactly. I just met with 50 people this past hour in our Escaping Enemy Mode book club. And one of the things we spent a lot of time talking about is, what does your body feel like when you're in enemy mode? And people had the variety of somatic responses that people brought up was fascinating. And for some people, it was shortness of breath. Some people, it was a hard, set jaw. Some people, it's like they're collapsing down in on themselves. One person said they feel powerful.
Oh, yeah.
And mainly the guy who said that, when he said, I feel powerful when I'm dealing with a stranger in enemy mode. When I'm dealing with a family member, I just feel sick to my stomach. But he's recognizing it, because I told them, I said, look, it's important to recognize it while you're in it, and so you can do things while you're in it to begin the escape, to bring your relational brain back online.
Yeah, I sort of noticed that I back out of my face, if I put it that way. It's like I put on a poker face, and it's like you're not going to read me at all here, and so the game is on to make you lose, and so I'll plaster some kind of fairly benign looking expression on my face and freeze it there, and that kind of frozen face feeling is the one that I catch myself doing. That's how it feels in my body. Now, down inside, I agree with that. If it's enemy mode with the family, I have a feel like, oh my goodness, this is going to go on forever. I have a sinking feeling, like stuff is draining out of me.
Yeah.
So some people's tendency when they get into enemy mode is we're going to engage and get them. And other people is, we're gonna run like a submarine. We're gonna be stay under the surface and avoid being detected. And I guess I tend to submarine a little bit. And you coming from a military background, you probably are more like the go and get them.
Oh, yeah.
Let's locate the enemy and have this out.
That's right. And that's my personality. And I saw that model as a child. So we're going to go on the attack, and we're going to have clarity about this situation. And I'm going to prove to you how I'm right and you're wrong. Jim, who do we hope would take this book and really change their world and their work with it? What type of groups do you think about?
Well, the one that has gotten so much coverage lately is police officers and the interface between law enforcement and the public. We got enemy mode going on both sides now. It's nothing new, but it's one of the most dangerous things to our current, sense of civilization and getting along together. We need to be able to engage with each other without that kind of enemy mode expression. So I'm very eager to have that. And the other one is, really related to you in a lot of ways, and that's veterans. There are, how many? 18 million veterans
19.
Currently? 19?
19.
Yeah. And the effects of enemy mode have been sort of imprinted on them in ways that it's hard to see when you're just living it, but your brain goes there too fast and tends to stay there too long. And it really, when I talk to veterans, which I do quite regularly because I know so many of them, right? Mm-hmm. And a lot of them are pretty young. They're just starting their families. It's an ongoing issue. So if we could actually have a conversation going, helping them and their families get out of enemy mode, I think this would be a pretty healthy way of restoring families. We really appreciate their service, but there could be side effects that they're having from service that aren't just PTSD or something like that. It's just, and this I think is one of them.
Yeah,
what would you add to that?
Well, I would just say that we learned in basic training to ignore signals from our right hemisphere to a large degree. We learned to particularly suppress the fear response so we could do things that are terrifying. And I think that does some psychological long-term damage to us at some level. And I think if I had been more equipped, a more relational being going into that, it might not have had the effect it did on me. And then add to it, the military is all about the mission and accomplishing the mission. We didn't talk a whole lot. Now, we talked about do the mission and take care of your people.
Yeah.
But we didn't give a whole lot of thought to what makes us a people and how can we be more relational with each other and have each other's backs. And some units did that well, and some units didn't do that well based on the maturity of the leadership, right? Mm-hmm. And so if I had known these things 30 years ago going into that setting, I could have stayed relational with my team, and we could have done a lot of great things relationally.
Well, quite a few of the generals that you were talking about were very much focused, before having this language and the science that goes with it, very much focused on having much more relational leadership and actually weeding out the non-relational people in the service.
That's right.
And we also realized in part of our research in doing the book that some of the training in the military will actually help you get out of enemy mode because it helps you locate and engage with whatever you think is a threat. Now, what you do when you engage in a relationship, that's not being trained. But the sense that you are my people, we got to protect my people, and I've got to engage with whatever is, looks like a threat instead of running away from it. That's significantly better for people in the military with that kind of training. So I think we can build on the strengths that the military has provided people, as well as we can build on the strengths that the police force provides people, but adding an actual dimension that helps them be protective by staying out of enemy mode, because enemy mode just wants you to lose. And, that's when we apply excessive force to things, because we're not actually trying to protect other people. And the other thing we've been talking about is with sports. I mean, close to 50 million households in the United States have children, family members engaged in sports and teams, and that can be very good for team and identity building. But every so often, the parent, a child, a coach goes into enemy mode, and suddenly what was being very helpful becomes relationally destructive, to building the kind of character we want. We actually, you did have a chance to interview some coaches on that, and they're responding very well. In fact, their team seems to be less stressed, more focused, able to do their schoolwork better on the side. There seems to be getting a lot of side effect benefits by not having that too much wear and tear that's put on you at the moment that your brain is in enemy mode.
Oh yeah, Jamie and Heather at the School of Mines in Colorado. They've had a winning program, a Division II NCAA program for 15 years, but in recent years they just weren't having the joy together, and something was off. And once they engaged a coach to help them, a leadership coach, Coach Lori Mateer, they began discovering that they'd been operating in enemy mode with their players, and their players were operating in enemy mode with one another. And of course, they're in the early days of the journey, but and we talk a lot about that older model of coaching that was the fear and the shock tactics model that Bobby Knight modeled in Indiana and throughout his career. And we think that's not productive. Now, getting out of enemy mode will not guarantee wins on the court, but it may help because you're going to be more creative. You're going to be more aware of each other's emotions. You're going to be able to sense each other's feelings and moves in the game and off the game, and building that sense of human connection, which we all deeply long for as we do wonderful things together.
Yeah, the brain science behind this is that the dorsal medial prefrontal cortex, which is a very important part of calculating things, needs to calculate the least harmful alternative. And if we get into enemy mode, and we're trying to win, we are not doing it in the least harmful way. We can still want to win. I mean, all of us want to win when we're not in enemy mode, but we don't want to cause unnecessary harm while doing it. And so when people get into stupid enemy mode, they end up wrecking all kinds of valuable things in their relationships. They throw stuff they shouldn't throw. They say things they shouldn't say. They actually go about destroying things of value in order to tell somebody else, I'm really mad. That's not calculating the least harmful alternative. And especially in business, when you lose it that way, you spend a lot of time advertising for customers. You have a lot of time recruiting teams. And if you do relational damage to them by losing it, this is, calculates to be a rather expensive thing to repair. And the people we interviewed indicated repairs never get really fully done. I mean, if you've done that kind of damage, you might go back to working together, but there's some scars in there that don't clear up. And so I think you interviewed or talked to a lawyer, didn't you? You said most contract law is just enemy mode talk. And anyone who's been in a divorce probably saw enemy mode happening going into it and through it. And the losses can be huge.
Yes.
And if they're preventable, that's something we would really like to see involved. The best response we're getting so far of immediate application is for people who are in counseling. Yeah. Every counselor I've talked to has said, I'm halfway through your book. I'm already using it all over the place.
That's beautiful.
And so, that's how we like it.
So we've talked about teachers, we've talked about coaches, we've talked about police officers, we've talked about veterans and the military, we've talked about counseling. Here's another example. Everybody's getting ready to go to a holiday gathering with the family, either at Thanksgiving or Christmas or any holiday and any of the holidays in December. And there's always going to be that fear about how's it going to go this time. And there's going to be that one person there that's going to set you off. And this morning, one of our friends who I've gotten to know over the past couple of years told a very powerful illustration of what this looks like in her life. And I'm not going to tell the whole story, but years ago, there was a breach in a relationship with a family that they had been friends with. And in fact, it was so bad that the men of that family hated this young woman. And it was intelligent enemy mode, and it was full on hate, and they had no contact for decades. Then she gets news a few weeks ago that one of the family members had died in a plane crash. And she felt like that she had to go to the funeral to support her friend who was a member of this family. And of course, the male members, the father and brothers, hated the young woman. So they went to the funeral, and she didn't know how she would be received. She didn't know if they would demand that she leave. And finally, towards the end of the funeral, when the family has processed out, she shared the story about how should I go through the receiving line and shake their hand and look them in the eye and say, I'm so sorry for your loss. And she felt that she should. She has a close relationship with God, and she felt a nudge that she needed to go through the line and give a hug. And as she went through the line, the dad, who had hated her the most, who had been her enemy for decades, grabbed her and would not let go and just wept.
Wow.
She later found out that the father has had a spiritual awakening in his life, and he has forgiven her, and he's asked her to forgive him. Now, can we imagine if these broken relationships all around the world, because of enemy mode, could be healed by the power of forgiveness, so that family reconciliation could happen, city reconciliation, tribal recognition, tribal reconciliation. I told them about the story of Father Ubald Rujiranguga in Rwanda. And really, it's forgiveness that's the way ahead. But we first need to recognize if we're in enemy mode or not. So it was a powerful story, Jim. There wasn't a dry eye in that Zoom meeting we were just on an hour ago.
Yeah, that is wonderful to hear. You've been talking indirectly about what the brain science might call acquired value. And that is, if I have an attachment with someone and you have an attachment with me, the persons that I'm attached to acquire value to your nervous system, so they become a more important person. And, that's a spiritual dimension of what we're talking about, that, it's generally pretty widely accepted that God loves people. And if that's a case and we have any attachment to God, all the people that God loves acquire value to us if we stop to make that connection. That doesn't happen automatically, but it's an available connection. And so what you're just describing is this, was it a father-in-law?
It was actually a friend's father.
Friend's father,
Yeah.
For whom relationship acquired value. And the way we describe it is we keep the relationship bigger than the problem. And so he found his way back to that, and we need to do that a whole lot more in our culture, because there's a lot of alienation. Over lots of topics, red and blue topics, mask, not mask, vaccines. Now you just go down the list of all the things that people can get alienated for. And what we postulate is it's not worth being enemies with other people over disagreements, because the brain has disagreements way at the end of its processes. So, what you're thinking about is when your beliefs come last, they don't actually come first in the sequence. How closely I'm attached to you comes first. And then we can keep it that way. Then we stay attached even though we don't agree. And, it was interesting for you and I. We had quite a number of disagreements going through the book from different perspectives. And so it created these interesting arcs. First, I'm trying to figure out the science, because it's not very well laid out up until now, especially in the area of hate. And you're trying to figure out whether you could actually get people in authority positions, power positions, to see enemy mode as a problem and do something about it, and how to go about these things. And even for a while you were thinking enemy mode might be necessary once in a while.
Yeah.
And so trying to figure this out together while not agreeing about everything was actually rather growth producing, I think, for all of us. And it makes for a more fascinating book as well, because there's a lot going on there when we're trying to figure out, how do relationships work? How does power work? And power, by the way, makes people more sociopathic. So, the typical solution is let's empower people. Well, if you want more sociopaths, that's a great way to go.
Yeah.
But if let's connect to people, let's have more compassion, actually puts us on a much safer path, even if we still disagree about a whole bunch of things along the way.
That's right. Wow. Well, Jim, it's a journey. It was a journey to research it. 2 years ago, we started working on this project, and it's finally out to the world. And I know we're going to have more of these conversations in the weeks ahead. So I think we'll maybe wrap it up right there. I just want to remind everybody, you can get a copy of our book wherever books are sold. Escaping Enemy Mode, How Our Brains Unite or Divide Us. Get a copy. Get a couple of copies. Share them with your family and friends. And it's changing our lives, and we think it can change our world for the better.